Hello and welcome back to the late night cool down. I'm your host Kyle Antoine, and in today's episode I'm going to be talking about the redundancy of life improvement advice, and more specifically videos or self-help books. And I'm basically going to be explaining that advice is not forever. Advice is not stable. And depending on what you're going through, advice might not fully apply to your situation. And in this episode, I'm going to be giving advice on how to get advice and where to look. So I am a spiritual healer. I am a spiritual teacher. And this doesn't just mean that I teach people about spirituality. I also use spirituality to apply to life. Like, life is spiritual, and oftentimes you can use spirituality to bypass or to jump ahead to solutions rather than struggling in the problem. So the reason why especially self-help books are kind of redundant is because every life is pretty unique. We share the same or very similar problems in certain areas of life with people who are like us, but how do we get from point A to point B can depend, because everybody's point B is pretty different. Now, advice that you think is good or is good for you at a certain period of your life may not be as good as different advice later on in your life. Something that I've noticed on my continuous internal improvement journey and raising my awareness or consciousness is understanding that the more I raise my consciousness or my awareness, the solution also changes, the problem also changes. If you're focused on a certain issue, when you raise your awareness, either the solution becomes apparent or the problem becomes redundant. There's a story about a Buddha, and he was one of the highest in some of the highest levels of this Buddhist. I can't remember if it was a certain practice or what, but basically he said that every time that he thought he got closer to the truth had changed, basically. Meaning that when he reached a new level of awareness or information, the truth changed. The truth is all-encompassing, but it's also ever-changing. So, say you're at platform 2, and you get to platform 3. What you knew to be true on platform 2 no longer, or not necessarily, is true on platform 3. And when you go to platform 4, what was true in platform 3 now changes. Now it may not be as true or completely irrelevant to the issue on platform 3. Now, constant self-improvement can also be a trap, because I know in my experience of self-improvement, sometimes I've gotten so caught up in how to improve and how to change and how to do this, that I forgot to enjoy life. And in my perspective, self-improvement is about learning how to enjoy life. And not everyone is going through the same thing, and not everybody is on the same level of something. You know, relationship advice is very popular in the self-help communities, But relationship advice is extremely personal to the person. So when I work with someone and on how to have healthy relationships, there are the fundamentals, there are the basics, but what someone may need to do is going to be different than what someone else may need to do. There's all sorts of parental issues that people get. So like, that could be abandonment trauma, that could be over attachment, unhealthy attachment styles. Like that's just one example of how different solutions for someone may be. And so I want to emphasize the importance of knowing where to look and what to listen to advice-wise, because one of the things that might be more important than the best advice ever is knowing what advice to take. And my advice on that is knowing yourself, knowing what may need to be healed or worked on or let go, and then seeking out that advice. And I also want to add some nuance to that, because the advice you're looking for may come from public figures or people that either 99% of the time, in your perspective, have shitty advice, or from people that you wouldn't really expect to listen to. And so the importance of also taking what resonates and leaving the rest. It's like when you search for a tarot video online, take what resonates, leave the rest. And also don't try and make advice fit for you. And how you'll know it's for you is it makes sense, and there's in some instances there is like, you may be looking not necessarily in the wrong place, but you may be looking not in the best place. I've also experienced on my self-improvement, my healing journey, where a piece of advice or something that I learned kind of like jumped me up like 10, what I'll call 10 levels or 10, steps. If you're going through a certain situation and you're like, oh, like I got to do this and I got to do that. It's like a shortcut in a video game. Something that you learn, you can just completely bypass a bunch of shit. And like those are pretty fun moments, because like, holy fuck, like, this was a lot easier or a lot simpler than I realized. Also, simplifying the steps or simplifying what you need to do, I think it can be very overwhelming at times to be like, fuck, like there's so much I want to become or heal or do or let go of. I don't know where to start. And just simply putting things simply, and also the more information you have on the issue, or the more information that you have about yourself, the more narrow the search is. If you don't know yourself, then you won't know what needs to be worked on. I also want to add that I think it can be a bit of a trap to in terms of self-worth and self-esteem and self-love and self-respect. Like, these self-love things I find just very common in today's age, that not many people have self-worth or self-respect or self-love. And the self-improvement journey, the healing journey, it's really all about building that self-love and that self-respect, and becoming the best version of yourself, and and letting go of versions of yourself or ways of being or ways of thinking or ways of doing things so that you can come out. And so I've noticed that really the self-actualization, the self-discovery, and the self-love journeys are really about, like, it's not about changing who you are fundamentally. It's really about finding the way to express yourself in a healthy, loving way to the fullest. And I hope that distinction makes sense. When I personally have thought I wasn't doing enough in whatever area of my life, I beat myself up about it. But what's the point of being on this self-love journey, this self-healing journey, this learning journey, if I inadvertently learned not to enjoy the moment, not to enjoy myself? And oh my god, there's a dog. One sec. Hi. Hello. Oh. And that's really what trauma healing does. It allows you to be present. It allows you to be grounded in the moment. It allows you to make healthy decisions. And there is a balance between enjoying the journey and enjoying your life as it is now, while also making forward movement in your life. And I would call that evolution, self-evolution. You know, we evolve by living life. We evolve by experiencing life. We evolve by learning and then doing things differently. You know, like when I say evolution, it becomes more natural in the mind, at least in my mind it does, rather than constantly growing. There is a slight difference between growing and evolving. Evolving means that you're changing and growing to the circumstance to better be equipped and to survive and to thrive in the world. Whereas a tree that just grows, it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. And just because something is getting bigger does not necessarily mean it's getting more sustainable. Does not necessarily mean that it's a good thing. Look at on apple trees. When an apple tree grows branches that stick straight up in the air, they don't produce any fruit. And they drain the resources into nothing, basically. Whereas if you pruned the branches that stick straight up into the air, then you would redirect all of the resources to the branches that actually will produce fruit. And then that fruit can grow bigger, faster, stronger, and better because it has those resources that aren't being needlessly drained into things that won't produce fruit. And I think I actually talked about something very similar in a tarot video on my YouTube channel, Prismic Heart Tarot. And it's titled Lessons of the Garden. And there's metaphors and stories in the Bible, and really in a bunch of different religions, but and spiritual teachings and practices where you look at your life like a garden, right? And now you want to water the garden, you want to put nutrient dense soil into the garden, you want to tend to the garden and prune the garden and take out the weeds and all of this, and that's really like what this journey is all about. It's tending to your garden, tending to yourself. And there was just something that I absolutely loved that I saw on Instagram a while ago, and it said that you can look at yourself like a bucket and with a hole in it, and you can put all the good water, the good motivational quotes and do all the right things, but if you don't fix the hole in the bottom of the bucket, it's just going to drain out again. So it was basically saying, it basically went on to say that sometimes fixing what's causing the issue is more valuable than adding more things to it. I hope that I explained that in a way that makes sense. I think I did. And I was like, holy fuck, yeah, because like if you're continuing behaviors that aren't good for you, and then you start doing a bunch of behaviors that are good for you, you may neutralize, or you may without actually changing like the behaviors that's causing issues in the first place. And I talk about this a lot on this podcast, is prevention over fixing the problem later. Obviously, if we can fix the problem that's already started, let's do it. But using prevention as a way of living, an example would be exercising when you're young. Why? Because when you're older, you become, and your body's not trained, or fit, or you get lots of aches and pains and stiffness, and your body becomes weaker. Whereas if you were to work out, do yoga, go for walks, keep active and keep fit, starting from a young age, you can prevent a lot of issues that are common in old age. So now if we look at, for example, smoking, or doing drugs, or drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, or drinking alcohol, or doing drugs, what is like, we talk about a lot on social media about hangover cures. Well, actually, I've been seeing less content on it, but maybe I'm not on the right side of the algorithm to see it more. But people talk about their hangover cure, where like the next day, they drink a bunch of Gatorade, or they just eat a bunch of McDonald's, or like, whatever someone's hangover cure is. The best way to not have a hangover and have something to recover from consistently, whether it's a daily or a weekly thing, is to not drink at all. If you don't want to develop, liver disease, or drain your body's natural chemical processes and disrupt them, the best thing to do is to not drink. So sobriety is not just about sobriety and burning your life down. It's also about like respecting the body, because alcohol is a poison. And I don't want to sound preachy. Like, alcohol is not a good thing to put in your body, but I'm not shaming people who do. But especially things like a weed or any other like drug. But weeds actually is one of the main causes of youth going into psychosis. And what is psychosis? Psychosis is the loss of touch with reality. The reality that we all share. You're just, you're way beyond. And I think it would also be interesting, just a little side note, to do an episode into psychosis, because I've heard, so many different perspectives on it, on a spiritual level, on a purely psychological level, and a mix of both. And I think it would be cool to just do it like an in-depth episode on it. So prevention. So this also goes over to relationships. The best way to not get into unhealthy or one-sided or toxic relationships is doing like healing work. Counseling. I'm a big advocate for counseling, and therapy, and there's different types of counseling, and there's different types of therapies. And really getting to know yourself will narrow down your search for a therapist, if that's something that you know or you feel you need. If you have a lot of childhood trauma, you would want someone who specializes in childhood trauma. Or if whatever you're struggling with, you want someone who specializes in that therapy. Now, therapy is not a fix-all solution. the like what you learn and what you talk about from therapy or in therapy, it needs to be used and applied, and the work that you do, every moment of every day also matters. And also understanding understanding trauma, and understanding what caused your trauma, and understanding where to go from here. Trauma, and I'm going to specifically talk about childhood trauma, fractures and sometimes even breaks your perspective on the world. If you grew up in an unsafe household or an unstable household, the world feels unsafe and unstable. Whereas someone who grew up in a consistent, stable, healthy household, the world feels more consistent and stable. And it's about practice too, with healing and with learning and stuff. It's about practicing what you learn, what you find out, and the more that you progress, at least in my experience, the more you're capable of choosing different things, choosing what's actually good for you, trusting yourself. And that's a big thing too, is people who don't trust themselves tend to rely on other people to their own detriment, or stay around people or in situations like a job or a place of living where it's not good for them. And it really comes down to a lack of self-trust. And spirituality, like faith, having faith that the universe, that your life will work out, that you can manifest, that you can do this and you can do that. It comes to self-trust. And self-trust isn't necessarily trusting that it's going to work out exactly how you planned. Self-trust is knowing that no matter what happens, you will be okay and you will be able to handle whatever situation is to come. That's self-trust. That's like, does a bird trust that the branch won't break, or does it trust its own ability to fly? And healing and self-improvement and self-evolution really comes down to learning how to fly, and being grounded and calm, and feeling stable, and actually being that. And I think one of the biggest pieces to self-improvement is the responsibility that we kind of have for each other and for the world. Are you responsible? Are you healed enough? Are you evolved enough to take on the responsibility of being a good, positive force in the world? Someone who's stuck in survival mode is not going to be someone that you can really trust. It's not going to be someone who is going to be very reliable, or someone that, I would not want someone to manage my finances who's stuck in survival mode. That's just an example. And I'm not saying people who are in survival mode constantly are bad people, but they don't make decisions based on reality all the time. They don't make decisions based on, potential. They make decisions based on their immediate needs. And to build a life, you need to have obviously you want consistency, you want stability, you want immediate tangible things like a job or, a way to have an income. But to do something beyond just surviving, you need to do things that are out of the ordinary. And when you're in survival mode, that just won't work, because creating $1 million or creating a company that produces however much income will never come from survival mode. The healthy relationship that is everything that checks off all of your boxes will not come out of survival mode. You cannot build a life out of survival mode. And I think that a lot of our societies around the world kind of breed people in survival mode. The spaces that people like, the being able to barely afford to live can put someone into survival mode. Being in an abusive household, whether as a child or with a partner, can put somebody into survival mode. And when it's at that point, you have to make decisions that will consistently and with stability take you out of survival mode. Something that's very common to see online is you can't heal in the same environment that hurt you. And that is so true. It's true because I've experienced that. I don't necessarily, it's really not that deep. Like, if you are if you are still living somewhere that harmed you, you're never, like, there's always that potential in your mind. Like, you can't truly grow, you can't truly heal. So it's at certain parts of the healing journey, which I think can be scary for a lot of people, is making the decision that's best for your healing and for you. And that often comes with relationships or long-term relationships, whether it's with friends, family, or partners, to cause them to end. And that's where self-trust, self-love, faith come into play. Oftentimes, we can even come into roles where we want to try and fix or heal someone or change somebody else, when that's really not our place. No matter how loving or how much we love somebody, we can never change them. Change manifests and comes in a person who is ready and who is willing, not because someone said something to them, right? And I think that's also it can feel very lonely on the healing journey, because once you reach a certain point, you're like, holy shit, like, these are you may realize the people in your life are not fulfilling. They're not fun to be around. They're not good for your nervous system. Whenever you leave the hangout or whatever, you don't feel inspired, but you feel like, oh fuck, why did I tell them that? Or, oh, maybe I can't do what I really want to do in this lifetime. When your friends should be people who, after you're done hanging out with them or talking to them about something, you feel better. You feel like anything is possible. And a lot of people settle for relationships that produce bad feelings, that produce bad outcomes, that limit you, because it's more safe, and it feels, let me clarify, let me create a distinction. It feels more safe. It feels more stable. But just because someone has been in your life for a long time does not mean that they're good for you. Especially if you're on this growth journey, this evolution journey, this self-love journey. Who you met before or at the start of your healing journey may not fit in your life anymore. You may have outgrown that person. And I think people shy away from ending relationships because they think that there's something there. But if this relationship has never produced a good feeling or produced a feeling of true comfort, true stability, like I can be myself around this person, or they've witnessed, like a hallmark of a really good friend is someone who has witnessed you in all different ways of your life, like different stages of your life, and are still your friend. You meet up and it's like you're talking to them. They're not like I find that some people don't talk to you, they talk to a version of you in that they created in their mind. And that's a key distinction. Who you are versus what someone's idea about you are two completely different things. And if someone's not willing to get to know you truly, and it doesn't have to be incredibly deep, but actually see you for who you are, and oftentimes people who aren't on their own journey of self-realization, self-actualizing, self-healing, will never be able to see you for who you are, because when you're that hurt, or when you're that broken, or when you're that angry or sad or upset or whatever, they never fully see themselves that in a true way either, or they don't ever see life in their true way either. So you can't expect someone who's not on that level to meet you at that level. It just won't work. And life is too short to be in friendships, romantic relationships, or with family relationships who don't see you for who you are, who don't accept you for who you truly are. You know, I'm not saying someone has to completely agree 100% with everything, but they should understand why you are doing what you're doing. Or, you know, and that could be in your career, that could be in trying a new thing. You know, the worst feeling ever is being around someone who you thought you were really good friends with, who truly cared about you, and then they say some out-of-pocket shit like, you really think you can do that? You really think you can be that? Or you think you're better than me, or you think you're better than other people? You should feel comfortable telling your friends your dreams, your goals, your aspirations, what you're doing with your life, and not feel like you're going to get judged for it, or not feeling terrible after just because you told them that thing. And if you're around people who make you feel like shit after you tell them something, or after you do something that's really good and they kind of shit on you, you need to find new friends, or you need to you know, get around good people, good environments, because your friend group will kill you. Whether, like, and I'm saying that metaphorically, like your friendships will kill you. It'll kill the best version of yourself, or a more healed version, or a more better version. Because the paradox with self-improvement is that you're going to get better, but there's always going to seem to be more ways to improve, and that's evolution. Evolution, it really never ends. And I'm pretty sure there's a spiritual law, like the law of evolution. Like, everything is always growing, learning, and you can evolve in the wrong, or quote unquote wrong way. And when I say wrong, I really just mean an unhealthy way. You know, we can evolve our unhealthy characteristics. You can evolve your trauma, or at least how your trauma affects your life. Or you can evolve in a more healthy way. You can nourish the strong and the great and the amazing aspects of yourself that you really admire. Or you can evolve staying in survival mode, etc., etc., etc. And your friendships will kill your dream. If you're around the wrong people, they'll kill your dreams. They'll kill your sense of esteem, your self-love, your self-worth. And if you're like me, or your favorite celebrity or athlete, or whatever sphere of life, and you see someone that you truly admire, like, if you want to attain a certain level of success, and success is subjective, you know, what's successful, when I feel successful, or what is successful in my eyes, it's going to be slightly different or completely different to someone else's definition of success, and that's okay. But if you want to be successful in any way, you need a good team around you. You need good people around you. You need people. Like, life is relationships. If you want a good life, be in good relationships. And if you keep attracting weird, narcissistic, toxic, unhappy people into your life, whether it's friends or whatever, there's something that's in you that's causing you to find those people. And that goes to a mental, psychological, and emotional level, but also to the level of manifestation. A healthy person is going to attract healthy people into their life, and when they come across someone who's not healthy, they're going to clock it, and they're going to be like, hey, we're not doing that. But someone who isn't healed, or hasn't healed certain things, or still thinks about life in a certain way, they're going to, oh my god, there's bats. Sorry, I'm in the park right now, sitting on a bench looking at the sunset, and like bats are like flying around. Holy fuck. Like, oh my god, okay, breathe. I just do not want to get rabies. Maybe I should leave, but we'll finish we'll finish this episode. I don't think they're gonna come get me. Okay, back to the episode. And this is why a lot of people who are successful, who give advice on being successful, is they tell you about their, like there's a famous quote that goes like, show me your friend group and I'll show you your future. I forget who said that, but show me your friend group, show me your future. If you're hanging, and another good way to look at this, and it's very common as well online, is if you hang out with 4 losers, you will be the 5th. If you hang out with 5 winners, you will be the 5th. You hang around 4 successful people, you're going to be the 5th. Because friendships teach you about the world, they teach you about themselves, and the level of awareness your friends have is going to impact the way that you interact with life. Even if you know really good things and how to do things from a really good, healthy way, if you're around 4 unhealthy people, they're going to make it extremely difficult or impossible to continuously and consistently act in the healthiest, most positive way that you could in any given situation. Whereas if you're around 4 healthy people, they're going to encourage that. They're going to nourish that part of you. And I'm not saying people are perfect, but I am saying there's people who are healthy and people who are unhealthy. There's people on your level or above your level, and there's people who are below your level. And it really comes down to, is it healthy or unhealthy? Like simplifying it. You can even, like, in the moment, if I'm nervous to go do something, like, I'll be quick check-in with myself. I'll be like, am I making a decision based out of fear, or am I making a decision based out of love? And a cool thing that I heard, little side note, is that the opposite of fear isn't courage, is actually love. You cannot fear something that you love. And I love life. I love myself. So I don't fear life. I don't fear myself. But I call it residuals. Things left over from the past. Things that I've worked on, but still come up residually sometimes. Where I'm like, oh my God, sorry. I just burped. I got a message. But, excuse me. But when I'm nervous to I want to go for a walk, and I'm feeling like anxious and stuff, I'm like, okay, like I want to go for a walk, but I'm feeling this way. So I'm like, okay, am I making this decision right now out of love or fear? I'm like, I love to walk. I want to go out. I'm going to make a decision based out of love rather than being like, and that's the other thing that's also kind of, tricky, is your nervous system. And I'm still figuring out the nervous system. I'll come back in a later episode to talk more about the nervous system once I know and understand it a bit better. But there is a difference most of the time if you have trapped emotions that are unprocessed, or past experiences that are left unprocessed and are stored in the body as a feeling or a stiffness, or however it manifests in your body. Having the foresight or the hindsight, or having that higher perspective override your decision making, so that your emotions, so you're not bound and trapped by your emotions, by your feelings. If I 100% of the time listened to how I was feeling in a very hard situation, I would never move. So sometimes in life or in an experience, you have to use your mind to override the decision-making process, where your feelings are sometimes or oftentimes the default. Oh, I'm feeling good, I'm going to do something to feel good. Or, okay, now I'm feeling bad, I'm going to do something to feel good. And how we, whatever choice that we do to feel good, it doesn't matter if it's healthy, in certain parts of the journey. Like, to you, it may not matter if it's a healthy way of coping or processing or turning how you're feeling into a positive experience. That's why people use drugs. Drugs are absolutely so unhealthy, but because it makes you feel good, for whatever reason, if it makes you forget, if it makes the situation feel more, makes you feel more capable in a situation, then at certain points to your mind, it doesn't matter. So that's why mental health is extremely important, because the healthier you are mentally, the better decisions you will make. And you can use your mind to override the decision-making process. Whereas before, you may have reached for a cigarette, or for a joint, or for a drink, or for a drug. Now you can override and be like, okay, just because I'm feeling this way doesn't mean I'm a bad person, or doesn't mean that what I'm experiencing right now is necessarily bad or the end of the world. I can actually maybe take a second to calm myself, to do some breathing. Maybe I need to release something. Maybe I need to go do something that's healthy. Maybe I need to go for a walk. Whereas, okay, I'm just going to go for a cigarette. And it takes repetition. It takes practice. The mind is a thing of habit. The things that we consistently do every day starts becoming our truth. But the truth is also, self-truth is subjective. What works right now may not work tomorrow. And that's also a very hard part to deal with in your journey. What worked yesterday, okay, now I need something different. Now I need something better. I need to learn more. I need to do more. I need to do something differently. And that can be very difficult to be like, oh, I just did all of this work, and now what was working no longer works. So that's okay. You learn. And I believe, in my the way that I view life is, it's about evolution. It's about finding the way to express yourself and to be yourself in the most expressive way, in the most healthy way, in the most loving way, and in a way that impacts the world around you in a really good way. And evolving, life does eventually become easier if you've been living in survival mode. And the original point of this episode is talking about how redundant self-care advice is, or and it's a bit of a generalized statement, but a self-help book might make total sense, might be everything that you needed at one point in time. And then as you maybe handle more complex situations or people or experiences in your life, that self-help book might become redundant. So I just want to make this episode really about pointing out how the journey is about evolution, and the more awareness that you gain along this journey is going to change sometimes the information that you need. If you've healed attachment issues, or you've at least become aware, becoming aware of something is a lot different than changing something. But to change something, you need to be aware of it. And so awareness is just it's a major piece, but it's just one piece of the puzzle. And finding the information that works with you in the moment is crucial too. Knowing where to look and what you need to look for, and applying it. And then just knowing, maybe down the line, this piece of information, or if down the line that information is no longer relevant to you, that's okay. So I hope this episode kind of helped you in some form or some way. And some people might listen to this episode and be like, I already knew that. Well, that's fine. this episode wasn't for you then, and that's okay, because you're at a different point of your journey. But I also want to point out that there's some information that I've found, that I've learned. There's some information that I've learned and that I've found is consistently true no matter what. You know, and that's like values, that's ideals or virtues. Like patience is always key. Love and having love and for yourself and for others is always going to be key. Having optimistic perspectives on yourself, on life, and whatever situation you find yourself in is key. So there's some things that you're like that I find are consistently true in any situation, no matter what. And in that way, you know, there is fundamental truths, and you can use you know, the virtues and principles to help you navigate, because no matter what situation you find yourself in, they will be true. You know, healing is a patient process. Healing is a loving process. Holding yourself accountable to unhealthy behaviors and learning how to move through them and learning new healthier behaviors is fundamental. Holding the people around you to a healthy standard of what you will and won't allow in your life is loving. You know, having grace for yourself is fundamental. Having grace for others is also fundamental. You know, there are things that I found that are consistently true. So if I'm navigating a situation where I'm like, I don't know what to do, well, I do know patience. I need to have patience with myself in a situation. I need to come from a loving place or loving perspective, and coming from a loving place doesn't mean that you are a pushover, does not mean that you roll over for other people. It just means that you see things for what they are. And that's another fundamental that I've learned, is that, you know, everything truly is love. And from my spiritual perspective, you know, the only true tangible thing in the universe is love. So and I think I'll end this episode with this. In order to make the best possible decision in any area of life is to have as much of the truth as you can. You know, you may have half of the information, so then you'll make half as good as a choice that you would if you had more, or the entire piece of the information. And that's where discernment, that's where mental health comes in, that's where self-understanding comes in, because when you understand yourself, it's a lot easier to understand other people. When you love yourself, it's a lot fucking easier to love other people. A love that's healthy, a love that's not debilitating, a love that's not self-sacrificing. So anything that you're looking for in life comes from you first, and that's manifestation. You know, the more you heal, the easier it is to manifest. The more that you know yourself, the easier it is to manifest a life that you actually enjoy living. You know, if you have no fucking clue who you are, you're gonna have no fucking clue what to do with your life. And for the people pleasers, it's time to get to know yourself. It's time to know what you need and what you want out of life. Because self-abandonment is not love. It is trauma. And that's something that needs to be addressed or healed if you want your life to improve. And that's just a side note. I really do enjoy talking about self-help, but I never want to tell somebody like, this is how you do it, because unless I sit down with someone and they tell me all the truth, there's nothing that I can really do, or the advice, you know, I'll only see half the truth. So my solutions will only be about half of what could be beneficial for somebody to know. And like, I really emphasize self-empowerment, self-direction. I don't ever want to sell somebody the idea that my way is the best way. My way may be the best way for me, but that's because I am me. The best way for you is your way, and hopefully it's a loving and it's a healthy way. And if it's not, then learning. And so that's really what I want a part of my podcast to be, is a place where I can give guidance, or I can give my perspective, and not tell, like, I never want to tell somebody, because I never want to tell somebody that this is what you need to do, this is what you should do. I truly believe that everybody is a spiritual being who at some level within themselves knows the solution. We all have a blueprint on how to heal. We all have a blueprint on how to get to where we want to go. We may not know the entire way all the time, or we may see the end goal, but not how to get there. And that's kind of like the part of the process. That's part of the process of life, is building and growing and changing and changing through healing, changing through love, not changing just to change, or changing to be cool, or changing to fit a standard by society. Change, I believe, is a byproduct of the work that you do within yourself, or the lack of work that you do within yourself. Like, I speak with experience, and I want to keep things kind of like I don't ever want my listeners, you, to feel like I'm telling you what to do. I at least, I guess you can look at it as like, I want to shine a light on what I know, and hopefully from my light you can make a decision, or you can make a change, or you can make whatever that is really good for you. And that's my hope, and that's my goal with a lot of my podcast episodes. I want to empower the individual, not empower myself because you think I'm so smart, So thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Late Night Cool Down. I really hope that you took something that will be beneficial for you, and I will be uploading more consistently. I've taken somewhat of a break for the past couple months. I also did record an episode for like 50 minutes, and the other night, like 2 nights ago, and when I got back to my new apartment, it was just not there, not even in recently deleted or anything, but it just like wasn't there anymore. So I was like, okay, I guess that episode wasn't meant to be put out. And something magical happens whenever I record an episode for the Late Night Cool Down. Like, when I record an episode for my podcast, like, I feel like this is it. I feel like I made it. I feel like it gives me such good fulfilled feelings. And another thing that I've noticed is that I seem to attract people who are high on mushrooms. Like, I think it was episode 2. I recorded like a full length podcast episode with someone tripping on mushrooms, like just by happenstance or whatever. And the other night when I was recording the episode, that like just didn't save. When I was finished recording, this guy came up to the hill that I was sitting on a bike, and he was like, do you got a cigarette? Like, I'm like, yeah, like, here. And then he's like, I'm tripping on mushrooms right now. And I was like, holy shit, like, because the other guy, I paid him I gave him a couple of cigarettes, and then his payment for the episode was a pack of cigarettes. And so it was a cool synchronicity that I've noticed. I don't exactly know why people on mushrooms, or like I tend to meet people on mushrooms, and they seem to like come to me for some reason, but I think it's really cool regardless. And I'm just going to do a little update here at the end of the episode for my podcast. I am going to be uploading more consistently and more regularly as my life has stabled out. And that's the other thing that I've had to be okay with, is that I need to really take care of myself. There is no The Late Night Cool Down without me, or it won't be as good as it could be if I'm not doing the best that I can be and making sure that I'm, housed and fed and all of this. And so that's kind of why I took a break. Maybe I'll talk about it down the road in a later episode on what has happened the last, 5 months almost. But things are back on track. I'm feeling more stable and secure in my life. And I have some collaborations lined up for my podcast. And I'm also kind of becoming more free in my vision for my podcast and my company and my life. And I'm learning to be less strict on what I think things should be like, and continuously developing. And I think that's the fun part of owning a having a podcast or owning a business, is that it's as freeing as you want it to be, or it's as strict as it's whatever you want it to be, right? And so I'm learning how to have fun with it. I'm learning that I don't need to close in on a certain thing. Season 2 was supposed to be at a point the collaborative season, when I think that really has limited me creatively in a sense, where there were points where I was like, fuck, I want to just, record a podcast episode and release it with just me. And because I was too strict on my vision for season 2, I didn't. So having this kind of break from doing the podcast has allowed me to open up my horizons for the podcast and season 2. Just because I don't have someone on every episode with me does not mean that I shouldn't release an episode, right? And in my experience, when I become too strict on what to do or how to live or who I should be, when I become too strict and I feel like I have to be this way, or I have to do it this way and no other way will work, then I feel very condensed. I don't feel expansive and free like I want to feel and be. And so finding the balance between doing it and also allowing room to be creative, or to do something else, or to do something differently, or to add something, or to take something away, and not being too strict on how I do it. So that's just kind of a little update from how I've been thinking about the podcast. But I've been asked a handful of times, what do I talk about on my podcast? And I've said this in an earlier episode. I talk about whatever the fuck I want. I don't want to limit myself to be just a fitness podcast or a podcast that strictly talks about societal issues. But these are things that I think are important. And society, politics, healing work are core things that I believe everyone should be aware of or involved in. And so that's really why I talk about it. But I also but it's not just that. My podcast is literally if I want to talk about whatever it is that I fucking want to talk about, I'm going to talk about it, So I feel like the Late Night Cool Down is developing its own kind of way of doing things too. As I develop myself, my podcast also develops. It also changes. And it's cool. Something I've noticed is my vision, sometimes the vision does change a bit, or maybe not change, but I see it in a brighter and a more aware way, where I didn't before. Like, oh, like I could do that now, or maybe I should do it this way, or, you know, like the vision itself, like the end goal didn't necessarily change, but how I could get there, how I could do things, changes. So I'm just trying to think of anything else I should update on. Well, I think that is it for now, but thank you so much for tuning in to the late night cool down, and I look forward to seeing it in the next episode. So thank you and goodbye.